Hello, hello. Welcome again to Ken Michaels Radio. And thanks to all of you who've been viewing my other videos and interviews that I've done on this channel. And thanks to all of you for subscribing. And if you haven't done so, please do so because I plan on having lots more interviews on this channel with people who are pretty much in the Beatle world, people who have worked with the Beatles, Beatles authors, and fortunately, some of them are friends of mine, and that happens to be the case with my guest on today's show. Boy, if you don't know her by now, you've been living in a cave for the most part. She has done incredible work on the Beatles, and she's my co-host, one of my co-hosts on the Talk More Talk, a Solo-Beatles Videocast. And she's appeared on pretty much every Beatles podcast there is. She's also known for a couple books that she's written, including Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours to the Beatles' lesser known tracks. And she's a big soul fan. I'm sure she's going to be doing a lot more work in the soul area, but she wrote this fine book on Michael Jackson, FAQ, All That's Left to Know, about the King of Pop. She's always got long titles. You just got to remember that for all of her books. Two great books right there, and she is such a pleasure to work with. And I'd like to welcome Kit O'Toole. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. It's great to be on your show. I've been on your radio show before, but it's a
True.
pleasure to be on your brand new YouTube channel. This is so exciting.
Yeah, I got the radio show, Every Little Thing. You were on that. I've got the other podcast show, Things We Said Today.
That's
And
right. I've
then,
been on that too.
you know,
So, yep, it's now the trifecta.
I'll have to invent something else pretty soon and have you on it.
Exactly. Yep, I've got it. I got to cover all bases here.
Okay. Well, I thought we'd talk about something that's really important to me, obviously, since we both done quite a lot of work on the Beatles, and that is the popularity of the Beatles, the group, and the solo music. And the reason why I'm doing this particular show with Kit is actually partly in response to the last show that we did on Talk More Talk, where we were talking about the last two McCartney albums, the brand new one, McCartney 3, and then Egypt Station before that, and how it has charted in America on the Billboard charts. And the trend is not just with Paul, but for all veteran acts, rock icons who are in their 70s and 80s, all the hardcore fans, loyal fans of that artist, buy the new album in the first or second week that it's out, and then it sinks like a stone. And in the case of Egypt Station, it was only on the charts for 4 weeks, and that was after debuting at number one. And right now, McCartney 3, after debuting at number two a couple weeks ago, is at number 90. And so this is a pattern that you will find with all these aging rock stars. And I believe with all my heart and soul that the biggest reason for this is because these artists' new music doesn't get the support that it deserves on the radio like it used to. And radio is a business like any other business. And every single format of radio has a demographic audience, anywhere from 12 to 54. And if you don't fit that category, they don't care about you. And if they feel that an artist's core audience is old, 54 or older, they're not going to care about their new music. So as these artists have gotten older, their airplay for their new music has gradually diminished. And so there's been, this big uproar about McCartney putting out so much colored vinyl and colored CDs, and that's all being done to manipulate the charts so that he would have a high debut. And there's no doubt that it helps. Doesn't guarantee that it's going to debut high or even debut at number one. But streaming is a very big factor in the charts these days. And I had a listener write to us on the show, and I'm not going to mention her name. I don't know if she wants to be mentioned, but just to protect her, she basically said, well, this is how it is. Young people these days don't care about old artists. They're not going to care about a 70-year-old, even if he might be one of the greatest artists of all time. They're basically concerned about the new music of the time. And today's music is basically rap and hip hop. And so that's just the way that it is. And while she admired me for caring so much about not just Paul McCartney, but everybody in that age group, you name it, Rolling Stones, The Who, Elton John, Rod Stewart, Eric Clapton, Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder, all the greats, um, this is their fate when they have a new album that comes out. In fact, in the last 5 to 10 years, I've read several articles from people like Roger Daltrey and Stevie Nicks, Elton John, even Dolly Parton complaining about this. Dolly Parton is as nice as you can get in
Yeah,
the music
that's true.
industry. For her to say anything at all that's critical, there's got to be some truth to it. It's such a struggle for veteran artists to get airplay of their new music. So this listener did write in and basically said that that's just the way that it is. uh, Young people these days who account for most of the sales of CDs, vinyl, digital, and streaming, they're not going to care about that music. That's old music. Just like we had the music of our generation, they have the music of that generation. So I thought we'd have a friendly debate about this. And I know that Kit has done a lot of research. She just did an article for Beatlefan, which she was kind enough to share with me. And she did a lot of research, particularly on the streaming on Spotify, and in particular with the solo music of the Beatles. I don't know if you have it in front of you. Do you? Do you get?
Yes, yes, I do. Yep.
Okay. So would you like to share that and comment? First of all, comment about what the listener said and how you feel about that. Do you basically feel that, all music is of a certain time and everybody has their generation? And then to think that it can go beyond that and last longer is like asking too much. I mean, let's face it, so many of these classic acts have had decades of success. It's not like it's
Yep.
just one decade, the Beatles, it's locked in the 60s, that's it. Or Elton John is a 70s artist, and it's just that's it. People who grew up with him, they're the ones that care about these artists. It's it shouldn't concern us so much whether or not they get new fans and new young fans. How do you feel
Right.
about that?
I feel like, because it's interesting to think about, because in my generation, we were still getting exposed to this. We were still getting exposed. I mean, it was, classic rock.
Hmm.
It was of course called in my day, and classic rock was still. I mean, that was still a genre on the radio. I mean, there were still loads of classic rock stations,
There still
um,
is.
and still is,
Yeah.
although not quite as much. I mean, at least in the Chicago market, a lot of those classic rock stations have gone away in this market, and the ones that are there, it's now mainly like 80s and 90s. It's and maybe even creeping more toward 90s. It's
Hmm.
kind of
Yep.
interesting. So you're not hearing a lot of 60s and 70s and all anymore. But also in my age group, you were still hearing uh, Paul McCartney, the Stones, and all, because they were still putting out new music, and and they still are, but it was still getting airplay, and they were still, therefore they
Hmm.
still were getting hits on the charts, and they were making videos. We were still seeing those. So, and then of course there was the biggest example of bridging the two, when Aerosmith and Run DMC made that big crossover single of Walk This Way,
Okay.
which was a huge moment, of in my generation, of really, bringing the then rising genre of hip hop over to rock, and saying, see, these two can coexist.
Not only
Um,
that, but as you know, what a big deal it was for Beat It to be played
yep,
on MTV and for Michael Jackson to have Eddie Van Halen on his record. And it even guaranteed in some cases for him to get airplay, Michael had on rock stations for that very
absolutely,
reason.
and yep, and that was very intentional. I mean,
Hmm.
Quincy Jones wanted that. I mean, he said, because at the time, radio in the early 80s, it was still kind of segregated. I mean, it was
Yeah.
still like, if you were an African American artist, well, you were R&B, so you were going to be put on urban radio. If you were, a white artist and more on the pop side. Well, that was, that was top 40,
Yeah.
that was the, so yeah, Beat It, you're right. Beat It was a very important record for that because that was a big, big crossover. So, so that was the time that I grew up in. And today's generation seems to be, for whatever reason, um, it started to become more, as you said, more hip hop,
Hmm.
and R&B. Um, to me, I think what's fascinating is there's been an increase in popularity. I don't know if you've seen these, of reaction videos on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fascinating. I'm sure the one that went viral, two, I think the channel is called something like Twins is the New Trend, something like that. And
Okay.
there are these two African American, like I think early 20s, I think something, and they reacted to Phil Collins in the Air Tonight.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was just wonderful. They'd never heard it before.
Hmm.
And seeing their reaction when the drums kicked in, and they were just like, wow. I mean, it was delightful. I mean,
Right.
but they're reacting to a lot of songs like that. And viewers recommend these songs. And it's astounding because they have honestly never heard these songs before.
Hmm.
And of course, and I'm sure you and many others are like, how is that possible? How could they have not heard these songs before? Well, I mean, they have said on their channel many times, um, I swear to God, we have never heard these songs before. Well, they're just not exposed to them. And I think it's a combination of things. Maybe the way they were raised, maybe their parents didn't expose them to the songs.
Right.
Also, it's the way too that I think that younger generations listen to music now, that it's kind of gone back to the segmented kind of listening of what it used to be. That with streaming is great in many ways. I mean, I'm not putting it down, but it also encourages you to just listen to what you're used to what
Right.
you want to listen to. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just like, okay, I'm used to hip hop, that's what I like, so I'm just going to listen to that.
Right.
you know
It's no
I'm
different than compiling your own music library, and then listening off your hard drive, and
exactly. So, you're not being exposed
right.
to other kinds of music. And, it's amazing when you see some of these reaction channels that when they hear other kinds of music, they really like it. I mean,
Hmm.
they're just like, wow, I'm gonna look into this stuff. So it's not like, so in a way that kind of shoots down the argument of, oh, they just won't like it. you know
Hmm.
it's that if they have the chance to be exposed to it, I think that's the problem.
Right.
Is that they just don't. And I think, as you were talking, as you were, you know uh, in your introductory remarks, I was thinking about, this is not a new problem. I remember in the 90s
Yeah.
when Sting had problems getting
Hmm.
airplay. He had a new album. I can't remember the name of it now, but I remember the big single off of it was Desert Rose,
Okay.
and he could not get airplay. I mean, he was trying to get radio. I mean, this was obviously before streaming,
Hmm.
before iPods, all that stuff. And so what did he do? He said, I'm going to let it be used in a commercial. And it was for a car. And I'm sure when this goes out,
I've,
your viewers will mention in the comments what the
okay.
car was. I can't remember offhand. And at the time, of course, a lot of music purists said, "Oh, how could he do that? That's
Hmm.
selling out." That move got him, if it wasn't a number one record, it was darn close. That because, and then he did have make a music video from it, but that move got exposure for him with that
Hmm.
record. People watched that commercial, was like, what a cool song. And it ended up,
Right.
so he circumvented the radio that way.
Very clever.
So very clever. So this isn't a new problem. It really isn't. So Sting realized, whoops, I'm getting up there in age. Not really, but I mean, in
He's
radio.
younger than the other ones we've mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. In radio, I guess he's up there in age. I
Yep.
mean, I think it's stupid, but I mean, I guess so. But even back in the 90s, he recognized that
Right.
and used a different route to, to get airplay. So this is not a new problem. So it's a matter of finding a way to somehow get people, to listen to it and expose them to it.
And I'm
You know
sure
what I mean?
you've seen just recently that Fleetwood Mac's Dreams made it back on the charts, all because some skateboarder put some of the music from that song in his little video on TikTok. And a lot
Tick
of young people were seeing it and they said, "What is this song?" And they investigated it. And not only did the song reappear on the charts briefly, but still, it's significant, but Rumors, where it came from, the album, started to chart again.
Yep. TikTok has become a force
Yeah.
as well. I mean that has become a force now. And in fact, some artists have even allowed their music to be used in TikTok videos and encourage challenges and everything.
Hmm.
Um, I know this isn't the kind of music we're focusing on, but Old Town Road from a couple of years ago
Sure.
became a massive hit because of that. Because he wasn't getting airplay, because it was such a kind of a weird song. It didn't really fit into any category. It wasn't exactly country. It was sort of rap and sort of wasn't.
Yeah.
So radio stations were turning it down. So what did he do? He licensed it and let people use it on TikTok and issued a challenge of people like kind of doing these goofy videos of kind of doing a country dance to it. No, number one record.
Yeah.
So
Well, it just goes to show you, I used to be very headstrong about Beatles music, not wanting it in commercials or solo Beatle music.
yep.
But then, you got to realize you're introducing that music to a whole new audience, a whole new generation. You don't know where it could lead. Same thing with Beatles music in movies. I
Yep.
mean, the big reason why Twist and Shout was a hit again, in the 80s was because it was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And who knows, that could have led other people to investigate other Beatle music. You got to find ways of attracting that young audience that otherwise wouldn't be looking at your catalog at all.
I know for a fact that move worked because I remember when that was I think it was 86. I was in high school, like freshman in high school, I think, when that
Uh-huh.
movie came out. And many of my friends, and I have been trying to convert my friends to
Hmm.
the Beatles at the time. And when that movie came out, yeah, everybody was like, "What is that song?" I mean, and they were then that encouraged some of them to investigate the Beatles. So that was smart to put it in that movie because a lot
And
of young people saw it.
nobody can illustrate this better than you, how
Yep.
you became a Beatle fan, which if anyone doesn't know, why don't you just tell the story?
Sure. Well, I mean, there were a couple ways, but one of the ways was that was through Michael Jackson. When Paul did the duets with Michael Jackson,
Hmm.
first on "The Girl Is Mine," but then "Say Say Say." And I mean, this
Right.
was, of course, during the time when Michael was, at the top of his powers. I mean,
Right.
he was. I mean, it was like kind of Beatlemania. It was like
Hmm.
that was my generation. Like he was kind of like the Beatlemania of our generation. I
I
mean, he really
remember.
was. Yep, absolutely. I mean, he was just top of the heap. And so when he did, particularly that video for "Say
Hmm.
Say Say,"
They were so
I
good
mean,
together.
which was that was such a good video,
Yeah.
and yeah, they were great together. And of course, as their voices just blended perfectly together.
Hmm.
Absolutely, that got my attention, and many of my friends, and I mean, in my case, I kind of knew who Paul McCartney was, but didn't really pay as much attention to him
Hmm.
until Michael worked with him, and then of course it was like, well, if Michael's working with him, then he must be cool. I mean, that now remember, this is my much younger self saying this. I mean,
But you're also a massive Stevie Wonder fan. So when they
and
did
that
Ebony and Ivory, didn't that make
that
you
got my
interested in
attention
Paul?
too.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I was, yeah, and I was a Stevie fan. So yeah, I mean, when they worked with, he worked with him as well. Yeah, I was just like, wow, who's this guy?
Mhm.
I mean, and again, I kind of knew who he was, but I didn't really pay as much attention
Mhm.
until that. So that's why, when Paul a few years ago, when people were really putting him down with working with Kanye West and
Right.
Rihanna and everything. I mean, you may not, hey, you don't have to like them, but I got why he was doing it, because he was trying to appeal to different generations, just like he did when I was younger. I mean, because people probably listened to those records
Mm.
and thought, well, if they're working with him, he must be cool. So let's check him out.
It's also the most streamed song from Paul's solo career right now is 4 or 5
Exactly.
seconds. So
Exactly.
yeah, we're talking about a song that was not only a top 10 hit in the US, but worldwide. It was massive. And in a lot of countries, it was a number one song, four or
Yep.
five seconds.
So it made him, it made him cool again. It made him, and even working with Dave Grohl. I mean, I think he
Yeah,
recognized that as well. That, I mean, I also think they're genuinely good friends, and Dave, of course, is a
right.
massive Beatles fan, a massive Paul McCartney fan. So I mean, it wasn't just a strategic move, but did it hurt? No, absolutely
Hmm.
not. I mean, I was amazed. I mean, it was kind of a big moment when he sort of reunited with Nirvana. I mean, when he worked with the, Sirvana, of course, as it was
Yes.
called at the time. But I remember thinking at the time, wow, I mean, that's quite a moment. I mean, working with, the number one grunge band of the 90s, part of it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was kind of a big, like, crossover generational moment.
Sure.
I mean, and so that's, and I think that's great.
So do I.
And yeah, and I also thought that was great, for Paul to show that, hey, these are, of course, all bands that were influenced by him and the Beatles in one way or another, but also to show that he respects them too. Um,
Yeah,
and as I said, bringing in new people,
right.
bringing in a new audience. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It bothers me when some fans think, oh, he's selling out. He's working with whoever who's hot at the moment, like Kanye West or, or Dave Grohl, someone like that. But I don't think he works with anybody unless he genuinely likes their music and admires them.
Yeah,
So, and that goes for the with the producers that he's worked with too. I
yeah.
can remember a few years ago when Paul was on the Grammy Awards and Adele was on, and Paul's in
Oh,
the audience and he's bopping his head to Adele. Well,
mhm,
he ends up working with Greg Kurstin, who produced Adele. But I
exactly.
think that he just really liked her music and probably
Mhm,
liked the way it was produced.
yep. Hey, if they do a duet, that'd be great. Hey, he seems to be listening to me with Rick Rubin.
I
So, I
know. Well,
mean,
this this is the clout that kid has in the industry. I'm not kidding about this. I mean, with Talk More Talk, she carries the show. I'm just going to
that's,
tell you. But anyway,
uh,
I've always maintained through the years that everything is all about exposure to young people. And back in the 70s and the 80s, when the solo music of the Beatles was played on the radio, partly because they're still young then, when it was played to young people on top 40 radio and also on rock radio, they responded. And in most cases, their singles and albums did very well. But as artists like them get older, the airplay diminishes. So, because of that, then the sales diminish. But there are some fans out there who will probably equate sales with quality. And if a record doesn't do as well as the records of the past, it couldn't be as good, and it just doesn't apply in many cases.
yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the time it's just it just doesn't get the exposure that it deserves. I mean, there are many examples of that there, albums that are, are excellent, and it's just that they just can't get the airplay they deserve, or could be the record company's fault that they didn't put in the amount of promotion that it should have gotten. But yeah, I mean, I've read some comments as well. I mean, I've read some, Paul hasn't produced a good album since,
Mhm.
1982 or something like that. I mean, no, I mean I mean, I'm not saying every album he's done is perfect and wonderful and all that, but it's just because it didn't sell well doesn't mean that it's a bad album. It's just that it didn't get the exposure that it should have gotten.
Exactly.
I mean, and you can tell Paul and his team have learned from that because look, with Egypt Station. I mean, they pushed that hard,
Right.
and they learned from that and learned to use social media, and
Right.
that's that was what they did. That team did on that record was really smart. I mean, not only, of course, the carpool karaoke thing. I
Hmm.
mean, that was a stroke of genius. I
Yes.
mean, that was because everybody saw that. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody
The
did.
fact that it's online, you can watch it whenever you want, and millions of hits.
Yeah, it did. I
So
mean, really, I can't I'm sure you same thing. I can't tell you how many people either emailed me or on my Facebook page say, "Did you see this? Did you see this?" I mean,
mm,
it everybody passed it around. So he did that, but he did other things too. He went on appeared on different channels for like Wired, GQ's channel, a bunch of other channels and did fun interviews.
hmm
I mean, not just his typical interviews. I mean, just did like I think it was Wired does some segments with artists like the top 10 most popular questions asked about you on the net.
yeah,
So
right.
they fun things like that. He
He
did
was on
that.
the WTF podcast. Yeah, it's one of the
Yep.
biggest ones out there. So
Exactly. Yep. So he started appearing on podcasts. He did that, and then of course he did some of those live shows like Grand Central Station, and
the
I
Cavern,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, the Cavern. I mean,
Abbey Road.
yep, exactly. I mean, he just killed himself for that album, but
Hmm.
it paid off.
Right.
Because he knew that he was not going to get airplay. So
Hmm.
you have to reach people different ways. And I think, he also finally understood that if you want to reach, an audience in other ways, particularly if you want to reach a multi-generational audience, you better get on YouTube. I mean, you just have to get on YouTube
Hmm.
and and podcasting too. That as well, but particularly you better get on YouTube. I mean, that's it. So he's definitely adapting with the times, but that's just what you have to do now to get your music out there.
Now,
Period.
how do you feel about, since you did research with Spotify, this whole idea about streaming, which is bigger than it's ever been before? And as a matter of fact, you sent me some information here about the end of 2019.
Hmm.
Spotify had what was it? I lost the number. It was like 17 billion streams of Beatle music. It
Yep.
was something really outrageous like that by
Yeah.
that time.
Hmm.
So that tells you, since streaming really appeals to young people,
Yep.
that they're discovering this music. But how does that compare to, you know, real sales? I
Hmm.
shouldn't say real sales. To me, it's hard for me to grasp this concept that streaming is a sale.
Yeah,
You
I
got
know.
to have something physical in your hand, or at least, MP3s or something, just to, want to hear a song and hear it is looked
Hmm.
upon as a sale, or they call it consumption. And in some
Right.
ways, some people think that's even more accurate because you can buy an album, you can buy vinyl or a CD and take
Mhm.
it home and not even play it, and no one will know.
Yeah.
But if you're streaming something, you're obviously streaming it because you want to hear it. So
Hmm.
maybe that's a more accurate description. If you're doing so well with streaming, how does it all play out in your mind? What's really that important? Is streaming more important these days than the physical sales? What's a real indication of how popular you are?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, in some ways, I hate to say it because I like you. I mean, I'm the generation where I like physical product. I mean, and that was king. You
Yeah,
know, but we have to kind of reshape our thinking
I
because
know.
streaming's here to stay. It's king. And I think now it does sort of come down to streams. I mean, look at how in stores and all. I mean, it's amazing. Like you go to Best Buy now, for example. I mean, I haven't been to Best Buy in a while, but particularly these days. But I mean, remember how big their CD department
Oh,
was?
sure, sure.
I mean, the last time I went there, I mean, it was like this. I mean, it's just incredible. Yeah, I mean, those departments are shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. Now, of course, I think that the physical product, now they're appealing more to collectors. I mean, that segment's doing well. I mean, look at how music stores have come back.
Hmm.
Those specialty stores, and obviously with McCartney 3, he was definitely trying to attract collectors with all the vinyl and
Right.
and that sort of thing. So that market's not going to go away.
Hmm.
But that's a niche market. um in terms of general, I mean, I think streaming is increasingly, the way that as you mentioned, popularity sales. I think that's going to be the indicator, and I feel bad for artists because as of now, I mean, the amount they get from per stream is pretty low. I mean, I
Right.
forget what the figure was. I read it somewhere like, pennies. It's a per stream or or a tenth of a penny, or I mean, it was something like that. Really pathetic
Yeah.
number. And they were fighting it for some time, and I think they've kind of given up because it's the way it is, and that's why touring, by the way, is so important for
Hmm.
artists. It used to be that artists would tour to support an album, and to support the sales. It was for that. Now they're just touring. I mean, that's how they make their money. Is
Right.
really, it's not so much from album sales now. I mean, that's how much things have changed. And and I'm like I'm putting down streaming. In some ways, streaming is good in that you can share. Yeah, it's a way that you can share music with friends and hopefully expose
Right.
them to music that I like. you know
Yeah. You could
that
put together a playlist, and it's really no different than my doing a radio show and playing the same songs,
exactly, yeah.
except you don't have a DJ. That's all.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
really, it could
Yep.
be that influential.
I mean, I do like that, and people do that all the time. They share playlists with people, and you can log on to Spotify. I mean, I look at this all the time. I see my friends that I'm connected with on Facebook. I can see what they're playing, and
Hmm.
I'll sometimes do it. Like, oh, that artist looks interesting. I'm gonna have to check them out. So that part of it I like.
Right.
And of course you can easily share on social media what you're listening to. So I like that part of it, but it's still, you still have that danger, as we were talking about earlier, of, it's still tempting to just listen to what you are used to listening to.
Right.
It's still hard to get exposed to music that's out of your lane, that's outside of your experience. And that's a big problem, and how
It's
younger listeners are not getting exposed to classic rock, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was talking about on our show on Talk More Talk, and I mean, my whole life, just about everything I've ever bought as a record was because I heard it on the radio. If it's a new artist, I was introduced to the artist on the radio. I wouldn't normally just try and hunt down a new artist. I'd have
Yep.
to hear it on the radio first. Someone has to introduce it to me, and that's a different experience altogether than just playing what you already know
Yep.
or what you're
And
familiar with and comfortable with.
right now you have to work at it. That's the main thing now, because I've said, people have mentioned, like, you see some people say there's no good music anymore.
Yeah,
That there's no good. No, there is, but you have to look for it. You have to really search for it, and so you have to do more. Whereas, as you said, with radio, they kind of did some of the work for you. They would, you would listen to station, here's a new single by new artists, and they would bring it to you.
right,
And now you've got to do a little searching on your own, and that's a lot to ask with some
right.
people.
Well, if anyone's curious when it comes to rock, if you
Mhm.
want to learn new rock, write to me. Because
Ken
I
will
still,
Ken will solve it all for you.
every day I still listen to the radio, and mainly in the car. And there's a station on Long Island that I listen to all the time for new music. And then I listen to a lot of classic music too.
Sure.
But I personally don't want to stay locked into one decade or a couple of decades. But a lot of people are very comfortable that way, and they stay that way the rest of their lives.
Yep.
But with
Yep.
this whole thing about streaming, the main reason why McCartney 3 didn't make it to number one is because Taylor Swift beat him out because of the streams that she got.
Right. Yeah.
So again, if streaming is something that appeals more to a young audience, how do you get these older artists like Paul to how do you introduce them to young people enough that they want to stream his music?
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? I mean, it's part of it is, and this is where I think streaming can really shine, is you have to do things like, you know, really, like, say, there's an artist that, um, you know, the young, God, I sound so old. These young people, like, good God, turning into my parents. These youngsters. But if there's an artist that they they like, that's in a similar vein
Uh-huh.
to Paul. I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head right now,
Hmm.
but to give them recommendations. Because you have to do things like that. Bring
Hmm.
it to them. To say, give them recommendations on that page. If you like so and so, check out so and so.
Well,
Things like that.
YouTube is good for that.
Exactly. YouTube does this
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah.
That is a good step. That is a really good step. Yeah, I mean, kind of like in their news feed, things like that.
Hmm.
Bring it to them, because they are not going to seek it out. Um,
No, if
you
you
know,
pick out a video on YouTube of a certain band, in the right-hand corner, you'll see all these other videos, and some of them will be bands that are similar in style to that band that you're watching.
yep, exactly.
So, that's a good way of learning
Yeah,
new music or other artists.
that is a very good step. I mean, that's a good step. And the collaborations. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, collaborating with younger people, or like, well, we can't do it right now, but when they've collaborated on stage with people at different
Mm,
concert events, that can help too. Because, like, I remember when at Lollapalooza some years ago, when Paul played at the here, and brought on Brittany Howard from Alabama Shakes. That
okay.
was that was awesome. I mean, that was I think it might still be on YouTube. I'm not sure. Brought her on to sing "Get Back" with him.
Mhm.
And that was just so exciting. Now, I knew Alabama Shakes before that. I mean, I,
Right.
I knew what a great band they were and all. But having moments like that, I mean, a lot of young people were at Lollapalooza,
Mm.
so they were getting exposed to Paul then too. But they probably were a lot of Alabama Shakes fans there, and seeing them together on stage, probably, hopefully that moment got them to then check out Paul, and maybe when they got home, and like, oh, let's look at his music too. So having them appear at festivals like that can help. It's because I mean having them, it's great that they have some of these classic rock festivals like they had that one trying to remember the name of it. It was in the desert. Oh, Desert Trip, I think it was
Okay.
called.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great that they have, all of them like they had the Who and Paul and on one bill.
Yeah.
But you're only going to attract a certain audience, But if you have them playing with a mixed number of bands like at a Lollapalooza, you're going to get a wider audience that way. You're
Yeah.
going to, so having them appear at things like that, once we're back to normal, of course, that will help. That
Hmm.
it's bringing the music to them. That you cannot just rely on the younger audiences to find music on their own. Another thing too, and I mentioned this in my article,
Yeah.
and in fact, your friend and mine, Ethan Alexanian, from the Fans on the Run podcast, mentioned this to me. That one of the songs, I think it was, I think it may have been, not sure if it was My Sweet Lord, I forget which one. I'd have to go back and look. It was in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. What
It
is
appeared.
life? I think was.
Oh, What Is Life? Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And and it was may have helped to propel uh, uh, all things must pass
Hmm.
onto the charts in streaming,
Right.
in Spotify, because What Is Life was used in that. So that's another thing they can do: put more of those kind of songs in movies. Then that will, and particularly those kind of movies that will attract younger audiences.
And also younger artists covering that material.
That's true. That will also help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so it's bringing the music to them. I know that makes them sound lazy and everything, but
Uh-huh.
that's the way it is. They're not going to find it on their own.
I just remembered, I thought one of the most brilliant moves ever when you're talking about collaborations, Tony Bennett, whoever who advised him
Yes. Brilliant.
should should
It was
get
a
10
son.
raises. It was?
Yep.
Okay.
It was a
But
son.
but to have, he worked with Katie Lang and he probably got a whole new audience just because of
Mhm.
that. And then he worked with Lady Gaga. And he had, top 10 albums because of this. And this is a man that at the time was in his 70s and 80s. He's
Mhm.
now in his early 90s. I mean, that's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the important thing to note about that is Tony didn't change. You know,
Hmm.
that's what his son Danny, I think his son's name is
Yeah.
Danny, said, we're not going to change you at all. We're not going to have you sing modern songs. We're not going to have, we're going to have you be just the way you are. You're going to be the Great American Songbook ambassador. We're not
Hmm.
going to have you, you're not going to rap. You're
Right.
not going to do anything like that.
Hmm.
But and so that's the thing, with Paul, and he doesn't have to change. I mean, he doesn't have to. I mean, he can do some new. He's experimented with some different sounds. I mean, I'm not saying he has to sound exactly as he did in 1976,
Right.
but he doesn't have to be completely, like trying to appeal to the kids and do something, that's completely not him.
Hmm.
But he can still, like Tony Bennett, work with other younger people, and still be Paul McCartney. He doesn't have to lose who he is.
Right.
So, and that's important.
Did you want to bring up the stats that you do have from Spotify?
Sure. Let me just bring up my article here. So, yeah. So I did this article because I wanted to look at, there have been a lot of stats about um, Beatles, um, listening statistics, but I really didn't see much about solo albums.
Hmm.
And, so I really was curious as to, what the top 10. I just looked at top 10. And in the article, I eliminated just to narrow the scope here. I didn't look at live albums and or compilations, and I decided to eliminate traveling Wilburys because that's kind of a different
Right.
category. So this is just strictly solo. projects. So I looked at, tabulated the number of streams. So this is the top 10 that I found. Now this is of the time this was published, which was last year.
Yeah. So
Um,
you'll just go by the millions. You won't give the full number.
yeah, exactly. We'll just
Yeah.
go by the millions here. So so number one as of last year was Imagine with 421 million listens. And number two was All Things Must Pass, which was 419 million. So
Boy.
pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Number three was, this was interesting, Double Fantasy Stripped Down. And that was kind of a surprise to me because, the stripped down version, and I'm not sure why. You'd think it'd be the regular version. I'm
Hmm.
not quite sure why.
Well,
Uh,
we've noted on our show the
mhm,
appeal these days of more stripped down, less produced albums, and hearing these songs without, a full band arrangement, without orchestration, without horns, that kind of thing. So,
mhm.
yeah, I think that's appealing more and more to people.
Yeah, that's true. And next was McCartney 2,
Hmm.
which I was surprised that rated so highly. Next was Band on the Run. So interesting. McCartney 2 was above that. Next was Cloud 9. So that's what came in six. Number 7, McCartney. Number 8, Plastic Ono Band. Number 9, Egypt Station. Now remember, this was before McCartney 3 came out, so I'm
Right.
sure if we were to run these stats today, it might be different. And number 10, Ram.
Hmm.
And I added in this that the highest charting Ringo, one was Ringo, and that had 35 million streams. But
Right.
so it didn't make the top 10, but that's the highest Ringo one.
Hmm.
So it didn't surprise me that there were that many Paul Paul ones in the top 10 because he's still very active and but I was surprised that McCartney 2
Hmm.
ranked that high.
I have a theory why.
Lay it on me.
Because Wonderful Christmas Time is part of the package. So if
Hmm.
you ever want to stream it, come Christmas time,
Yep.
that's the only way you can get it, is on
Hmm.
there. Um, yeah. What's really interesting here in this list is that number 10 is Ram, and as we have mentioned many times on the show, there is an album that has really gained in stature over the years.
For
That has
sure.
63 million. So
Hmm.
between Ram at 63 million and Imagine at 421 million, that's a lot of streams.
Yep.
So it tells you how well these 10 albums are doing.
Hmm.
It doesn't surprise me Band on the Run would
Yeah.
be in there and Cloud Nine and Plastic Ono Band. I mean, despite all the respect that it's gotten through the years, it's a hard album to listen to.
Yeah.
So and it's gonna jump as soon
Oh
as the
yeah,
box
this
set
year it
comes out.
will.
Yeah. So
Yep.
yeah, but
Yeah, it'll
it's
be interesting. I'll have to run the stats again later this year when other of the albums come out to see how they'll change.
yeah.
Uh, you know, but yeah, because like some of the like Double Fantasy and Imagine, I mean, I think some of that was a bump from all of the the 50th anniversary. Or excuse me, 40th anniversary of
Mm.
his death and that sort of thing. So I think part of that was maybe due to that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting. I'll run it again, and then of course McCartney 3 came out since then. So I'll have to run those again and see how they've changed.
By the
Um,
way, let me correct myself. It was My Sweet Lord, not What Is
mhm.
Life, that was in
Oh, okay.
Guardians
So I
of the
was My
Galaxy.
Sweet Lord.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Ethan.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
He's gonna let me have it now.
No, no, no. That's all
Hmm.
right. But but yeah, so but it, and it, Ethan point to quote Ethan again. I mentioned I quoted him in my article, because I asked him about about McCartney too, because that's actually one of his favorite Paul albums, and he
Hmm.
said one of the reasons too that he thinks that it ranks higher is that and this could be true, that younger listeners, they like and same with Ram, that kind of DIY indie kind of quality of that and Ram, that they may be drawn to that as well, with as opposed to maybe Band on the Run and some other McCartney albums. So that may also um,
Yeah.
be a
Well,
reason why those two rank,
well,
which could be true.
the first McCartney album's in there too, so
Yeah,
that
exactly.
could also explain it.
Yep. So that's true. And as I wrote in the article, Imagine kind of didn't surprise me, not just because there was increased attention for John last year, but also, I mean, Imagine continues the song continues to be
Right.
so popular. I mean, it's so enduring. So that didn't surprise me entirely.
And there's
Uh,
always been a big push from Yoko, to make sure that song is heard for so
exactly.
many different campaigns. And it's a
Yep.
good thing. A lot of people
Yep.
around the world know the song and may not know it's John.
Yeah.
It's John's
Exactly.
song, but the song is probably more popular than him.
Exactly. But as yeah, but as yeah, really. But as I note in the article, I think it's important that that streaming could play an important part in keeping the solo catalog alive,
Mm,
because present and certainly exposing it more to younger audiences, because look at those numbers. I mean,
sure.
people are streaming them. So it's just a matter of, as we've been talking about, keeping them, exposing them to these audiences in different ways, and because they're listening.
So then that leads me to a question which is really tough to answer, which is
Uh oh.
what's more important these days, radio or streaming?
Oh boy. Well, it's interesting. I sent you an article, really interesting
Hmm.
article from that Rolling Stone one,
Yeah.
and it argued that radio is not dead.
Hmm.
That teenagers, particularly, they do still listen to radio, and so it's not dead with younger listeners. They listen to it in a different way through their phones.
Hmm.
That's so definitely the the medium has changed.
Right.
It's all about convenience. so um, so radio still has a part to play, but it's right now, according to that article, they're kind of even. Like the gap is narrowing as to which is more important, and right now they're kind of running even. Is that going to continue to be that way? I don't know. It has changed so fast. You can speak to this as well as I can, maybe
Hmm.
better than I can. You know, I although I mean, iHeartRadio is a very popular app, and people use it to listen to different radio stations.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering if radio is completely irrelevant,
I
as
don't
some
think
are
so.
predict as some have
Yeah.
predicted it's going to be. Is it going to be? I think streaming will be just as important, but I think predicting radio's complete death is premature. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
Well, apps certainly help,
Yes,
you
apps are a
know,
big help.
but that article was very interesting because it was basically saying that sometimes parents of kids who were raised on radio, who still listen to radio, are introducing some of their favorite stations to their kids, and
Yeah,
they're listening. And meanwhile, the kids are teaching the parents about streaming.
yeah.
So they're learning more and more. And, I think it works hand in hand. But as
Hmm.
for what's more important, I really don't know, you know, what the correct answer would be for that. But, they're both very important still to this day, as far as I'm
Absolutely.
concerned.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, right now they're kind of, yeah, they're kind of even. That's, or at least according to that article, they're even. But I was really glad to read that, that teenagers still do listen to the radio. It's just at times they listen in a different way. And I agree. I think the apps have helped a lot because that's the thing. The phone is
Mm,
king with
yeah,
younger listeners. That's what they use to listen to everything. So as long as it's accessible in that way, then they'll use it.
yeah. You know something? It's kind of interesting you bring this up about the phones because, we would all give anything in the world for this pandemic to have never happened.
Yep.
But one of the effects from this is that people have been home, out of work. They've been looking for things to do, and they've been discovering more internet radio stations, and they've been discovering podcasts. The podcast industry has boomed,
Oh, that's
you know,
exploded.
and especially in almost a year now since we've had this pandemic. So I think that in many ways, by listening to other podcast shows on the Beatles like ours, people get educated and they're curious and they want to learn about the solo music and the group music from the Beatles.
Yep.
So, it all makes a difference.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. That's for sure, and that's a really good point. That's, yeah. Podcasts have actually absolutely exploded, and more and more artists are recognizing that,
Yeah.
and so they're making appearances to promote their work and on all different podcasts
Yeah.
and YouTube channels.
Look at
Uh, y-
Paul.
Paul did that
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Mm.
yeah, Paul, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on our show anytime.
Yep. Hey, I can put you on all my different podcasts if you
No
want.
problem.
I'll make room for you anytime you want.
That's right.
So before we go, you have a new book coming out that you've written with Ken Womack. You want to tell the folks about that, what it's all about?
You bet. It's called Fandom and the Beatles. This is an area that we felt hasn't been researched as much about, how fandom has changed over time, how it has impacted not just first generation fans, but subsequent generations, today's generation, how they have. How it has changed and even how technology has impacted how
Mm.
people express their fandom and so forth. So Ken and Womack and I have edited this book. We've been working on it 2 years, and it's finally coming to fruition. We have a number of leading scholars who have contributed chapters to all sorts of aspects of fandom. We are so excited about this. It's on Oxford University Press. If all goes well, it's coming out in March.
Mm.
So be on the lookout. We'll be coming out with more details about it as soon as we know. You can pre-order it on the Oxford University Press site and through the Fest. Mark Lapidus wrote the foreword to this
Oh,
book.
very
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, on fandom, Beatles and fandom. I mean, who else, right? So you can order it through them as well.
Okay, very good. And I'm sure once that book is out, we're going to be discussing that on Talk More Talk.
I think
You
that's a
know,
safe bet.
we can drag Ken out to be on the
Yes,
show.
I think we can. Yeah,
Okay. He's always typing away.
always.
The guy never sleeps.
He never sleeps.
And also, you should let the folks know that you've been involved with this course on Motown, which
Yeah.
I wish I signed up for it.
You still can.
Okay.
Yes, you still can. Yeah, I am really excited. As you mentioned at the top of the show, soul and R&B is one of my other passions, and really excited to be teaching this course. It's through Monmouth University, and it's on Zoom, and it's for 3 weeks. It's 3 Thursdays. It's starting January 28th, and there is still time
Oh,
to
good.
sign up. And I will post the link to sign up. It'll be on our Talk More Talk page. It'll be on my Facebook page. You can just look me up on there, and it is going to be about the history of the label, but it's also going to be about how Motown impacted music and culture because it goes beyond just the music. I mean, it really changed culture, changed history. I have been learning so much about the label and about, of course, the music. We're going to hear lots of great music. I've got lots of fun things planned. By the time this course is over, I think you will be listening to the wonderful music of Motown in an entirely different way. So I hope you'll join me on a 3 week journey through this incredible label.
Wow, that sounds really exciting.
Yep, I'm
Apart from
excited.
all the great music that they put out in the 60s, I also look towards what springboarded from that, and like the solo careers of Smokey Robinson, and what Stevie Wonder created, and how, ahead of his time he was, especially in the 70s, and all the albums that he made. And then from the Jackson 5, you got Michael Jackson and all that he created. It's like one thing led to another. There was this domino effect. And so many artists today are influenced by Motown and by specific people like Michael Jackson or Stevie Wonder and Smokey,
Exactly. Yep, it changed music, changed history for sure.
right? Okay. Well, we will look forward to that. And I will look forward to my next show with you on Talk More Talk.
Absolutely.
And I want to remind everybody, we have our YouTube channel, Talk More Talk, a Solo-Beatles Videocast. We've been doing the show for over 2 years now.
Wow.
And a lot of great shows we've done with Kit and Tom Hunyadi and Joe Mayo, known as Mean Mr. Mayo. And occasionally Ken Womack joins us. And if you can, please subscribe to our YouTube page. I've got my other podcast show. I have many lives. I'm like a cat.
He wears many hats.
My other podcast, Things We Said Today on the Beatles, that's been around since 2012.
Wow.
Got so many shows that you can listen to now from the past with different lineups of people, and you can subscribe to that. Things We Said Today, and of
He
course,
never
there's this
sleeps
one.
either.
No, I'm not. I'm sharing a room at Ken Womack's house, but you don't know
That's
about.
right.
Anyway, it's the Ken and Ken show.
That's right. Ken squared.
So thanks to all of you for joining us for this. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. There'll be more to come very soon. A lot of interviews I have in store. So if you can, please make sure you join me here at Ken Michaels Radio. Thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next time.